I stared at my phone screen, reading the text from Mom 3 times before it sank in. After spending 2 months planning every detail of their 30th anniversary trip to Napa Valley, researching wineries, booking the perfect vineyard cottage, coordinating with my brother Jake about splitting costs, they were replacing me with Tiffany, his girlfriend of 6 months who thought wine came from a box, the woman who called me extra for bringing homemade appetizers to family dinners. I typed back one word, got. Then I started canceling everything. The cancellation process felt like dismantling my own heart piece by piece. I pulled out my leather planning notebook, the one I'd filled with detailed notes over 8 weeks of preparation. Page after page revealed the depth of my commitment to making their anniversary perfect. I had called 17 different wineries across Napa Valley, comparing tasting experiences and vineyard views. Each conversation lasted at least 20 minutes as I explained my parents' preferences. Mom loved buttery Chardonnays with oak undertones, while Dad preferred bold Cabernet Sauvignon with earthy finishes. I'd taken notes on which vineyards offered private tastings, which had the best sunset views for photographs, and which sommeliers could share stories about their winemaking process. The cottage reservation alone had taken 3 days to secure. I'd searched through dozens of properties before finding the perfect 2-bedroom retreat nestled between rolling hills of grapevines. The place featured a wraparound porch with rocking chairs, a stone fireplace, and French doors that opened to a private garden where wild roses climbed wooden trellises. I'd specifically chosen it because the listing mentioned hummingbird feeders and morning coffee service, 2 things that would make Mom feel pampered. Beyond accommodations, I'd arranged for Chef Michelle, a local culinary expert who specialized in farm-to-table dining experiences. She would arrive at the cottage each evening to prepare intimate dinners featuring locally sourced ingredients paired with wines from the day's tastings. I discussed their dietary preferences in detail with Chef Michelle, explaining that Dad couldn't tolerate too much garlic, and Mom preferred lighter proteins after 6 in the evening. The surprise anniversary photo session had required extensive research to find someone who understood the romantic vision I wanted to create. I discovered Emma Rose Photography through a blog post about capturing authentic moments in natural settings. Emma specialized in golden hour portraits among vineyard rows, and I'd booked her for a 2-hour session during what weather forecasts predicted would be a clear Saturday evening. Transportation arrangements included a luxury sedan service for airport transfers and a vintage convertible rental for exploring the valley. I'd chosen the convertible specifically because Dad had mentioned multiple times how he'd always wanted to drive through wine country with the top down, feeling the California breeze while surrounded by endless vines. The custom wine labels represented my most personal touch. I'd worked with a local graphic designer to create elegant labels featuring my parents' wedding photo from 1993. The black and white image showed them dancing at their reception, completely lost in each other's eyes. I'd planned to have these labels applied to bottles from their first tasting, creating keepsakes they could treasure forever. My text chain with Jake from 6 weeks ago still showed his enthusiasm for the project. "Debra, this sounds absolutely incredible. Mom and Dad are going to cry happy tears when they see everything you've planned. I can't believe how thoughtful every detail is. You're seriously the best sister ever." His follow-up messages had been equally supportive. "I told Jessica about your planning, and she said she hopes someone cares enough to plan something this special for her someday. You're setting the bar really high for romantic gestures." That enthusiasm made his betrayal cut even deeper. Jake had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. At 26, he'd somehow managed to maintain his status as the baby of the family, despite being only 2 years younger than me. His real estate career had taken off immediately after college, and Mom loved bragging about his sales numbers to anyone who would listen. Meanwhile, my marketing coordinator position at a Denver consulting firm seemed mundane by comparison, even though I'd worked incredibly hard to earn my current role and had consistently exceeded performance targets for 3 consecutive years. But Jake's success felt effortless and glamorous, while mine required constant proof and validation. This anniversary trip had represented my chance to finally be the daughter who created something magical, something that would make them proud and grateful. I'd taken vacation days from my demanding job, using precious time off to personally handle every arrangement instead of delegating to travel agents or online booking services. Each phone call, each email, each confirmation represented my desire to prove I could be the daughter who went above and beyond. The evening Jake introduced Tiffany to our family 6 months ago, she'd made her opinion of me clear within the first hour. When I'd brought homemade spinach and artichoke dip to accompany store-bought appetizers, everyone else contributed. She'd laughed and said, "Wow, Debra, that's really extra. Most people just grab chips and call it good." Her comment had stung because it dismissed the care I'd put into contributing something special. I'd spent 3 hours preparing the dip using a recipe I'd perfected over years, incorporating fresh spinach from the farmer's market and real Gruyere cheese instead of processed alternatives. But in Tiffany's world, effort equaled unnecessary complication. When I called Vintage Valley Vineyard to cancel our reservation, the devastation hit me full force. "This is quite unusual," said Margaret, the reservations coordinator I'd worked with throughout the booking process. "Everything seemed perfectly arranged. Your parents are fortunate to have someone who cares so much about their special celebration." Her words made my throat tighten with unshed tears. "There's been a change in plans," I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm so sorry to hear that. Should I cancel the photographer and chef arrangements as well? I have their contact information if you need to reach them directly." Before I could respond, Margaret continued with information that made my blood run cold. "Actually, I should mention that your brother called yesterday about the reservation. He said there was a family emergency and asked to transfer everything to his name and credit card. I told him we'd need authorization from you since you made the original booking, but he seemed quite insistent." My hands trembled as I absorbed this information. "He did what?" "He asked to take over the entire reservation. When I explained our policy about authorization, he said you'd probably call today to confirm the transfer. He seemed to know all the details about the cottage, the chef, and the photography session." The betrayal felt like a physical blow. Jake hadn't just convinced our parents to replace me, he'd actively moved to steal the entire arrangement I'd created. "Did he mention anything else?" Margaret's voice carried a note of discomfort. "He asked about payment arrangements and vendor contacts. He seemed particularly interested in the photography package and chef services. I hope everything is all right with your family." I ended the call feeling nauseous. This wasn't simply about being replaced on a family trip. Jake was appropriating my work entirely, planning to present my months of research and planning as his own thoughtful contribution to our parents' anniversary celebration. When I called Jake directly, he answered on the second ring with casual cheerfulness that made my anger spike. "Hey, Debra, I was wondering when you'd call." "You contacted the vineyard behind my back," I said without preamble. His laugh carried no trace of guilt or embarrassment. "Come on, don't be dramatic. Tiffany really wanted to experience wine country, and Mom thought it would be more fun with her along. You know how much Mom enjoys having another woman to talk to during family trips." "I spent 2 months planning every detail of this trip, Jake. And it sounds amazing. Tiffany's really excited about the photography session and the private chef. She's never done anything that fancy before." The casual way he discussed my arrangements as if they belonged to him made my vision blur with rage. Those arrangements were made for Mom and Dad's anniversary. I researched every vineyard, interviewed 3 different chefs, and spent hours coordinating schedules. "Look, I get that you're disappointed, but this works out better for everyone. Tiffany knows how to have fun and go with the flow. You know how you can be about sticking to schedules and making sure everything goes according to plan. This trip should be about relaxation and spontaneity." His words felt like a slap. Throughout our entire conversation, he showed no recognition of the time, effort, and care I'd invested in creating this experience. Instead, he positioned my thoroughness as a character flaw that would somehow diminish our parents' enjoyment. I'm canceling everything, I said finally. What do you mean canceling? We still want to go on the trip. Then plan your own trip, Jake. Figure out your own accommodations, research your own restaurants, and book your own activities. See how spontaneous and relaxing that process feels. I hung up before he could respond, but my hands were shaking with adrenaline and hurt. In less than 24 hours, I'd gone from excited anticipation about creating a perfect anniversary celebration to the devastating realization that my own brother saw my contributions as interchangeable conveniences he could claim whenever it suited him. Sunday dinner at my parents' house had been a family tradition since Jake and I were teenagers, but walking through their front door 3 days after the anniversary trip disaster felt like entering enemy territory. The familiar aroma of Mom's pot roast usually comforted me, but today it made my stomach clench with anxiety. I heard Tiffany's distinctive laugh echoing from the living room before I'd even removed my jacket. She was perched on the edge of the sectional sofa, her phone positioned to capture the perfect angle as she showed Mom a series of Pinterest boards. "So I'm thinking this outfit for the vineyard tours," Tiffany was saying, swiping through images of flowing sundresses and wide-brimmed hats. "The lighting in wine country is supposed to be absolutely gorgeous for photos, and I want everything to look cohesive for my social media content." Mom nodded enthusiastically while examining each carefully curated image. "These are such lovely choices, dear. You have such an eye for style. Debra usually just wears practical clothes when we travel, but you're thinking about the whole aesthetic experience." The comparison hit me like a physical blow. I'd chosen practical clothes for family trips because I'd always been the one handling logistics, carrying extra supplies, and managing unexpected situations while everyone else enjoyed themselves. But apparently, my practical approach had been noted and found wanting. "I've been researching the best spots for content creation." Tiffany continued, completely unaware of my presence in the doorway. "There are these amazing golden hour locations between the vineyard rows that will create the perfect backdrop for romantic couple photos. I'm planning to document the entire experience as a love story series." Dad emerged from the kitchen carrying his favorite beer, a local craft brew he'd discovered during a previous visit to Colorado wine country. "Finally, someone who appreciates the finer points of wine culture," he said, settling into his recliner. "I've been reading about vintage classifications and tasting notes so I can share some real knowledge during our visits. It'll be nice to have someone who's genuinely interested, instead of just taking notes like it's a homework assignment." His words felt like ice water in my veins. I'd taken notes during previous wine tastings because I'd wanted to remember details that would help me plan future experiences he'd enjoy. Every question I'd asked, every detail I'd recorded, had been motivated by desire to understand his interests and create better memories together. But he'd interpreted my attention to detail as academic detachment rather than genuine care. Uncle Marcus and Aunt Linda arrived just as I finally entered the living room, their presence providing a brief distraction from the ongoing anniversary trip planning session. Emma, their 17-year-old daughter, immediately gravitated toward me with the kind of perceptive awareness that teenagers often possess about family dynamics. "Debra looks like someone stole her lunch money," Emma whispered as she hugged me hello. Her observation was uncomfortably accurate. During dinner, the conversation revolved around Tiffany's excitement about experiencing wine country for the first time. Mom described how refreshing it was to have someone in the family who approached new experiences with pure enthusiasm rather than overwhelming preparation. "Tiffany just wants to enjoy the moment and see where the adventure takes them," Mom explained while passing the mashed potatoes. "There's something so appealing about spontaneity. Sometimes I think we get too caught up in planning every detail instead of just embracing the experience." Aunt Linda raised an eyebrow at this comment. "Planning usually ensures that experiences actually happen smoothly. There's nothing wrong with thoughtful preparation." "Oh, I completely agree." Tiffany jumped in quickly. "But there's also beauty in leaving room for unexpected discoveries. Some of the best travel experiences happen when you're open to changing course if something interesting presents itself." Her words sounded reasonable on the surface, but I knew she was building a narrative that positioned my planning style as restrictive, while presenting her approach as admirably flexible. She was reframing the situation to make my displacement seem like a positive choice rather than a hurtful rejection. Jake seemed oblivious to the undercurrents of tension, enthusiastically describing how he'd been researching the best Instagram locations in Napa Valley so they could capture professional quality photos throughout their trip. "Tiffany has such a great eye for composition," he said proudly. "She's going to help me step up my social media game." "That reminds me," Tiffany said, reaching for a designer tote bag beside her chair. "I brought something to show you the kind of thoughtful touches I'm planning for the anniversary celebration." She produced a craft paper gift bag tied with cream-colored ribbon, presenting it to Mom with the kind of ceremony usually reserved for significant occasions. "I hope you don't mind that I got excited and started working on some personalized elements for your trip." Mom's face lit up as she untied the ribbon and looked inside the bag. "Oh my goodness, Tiffany, what have you done?" She pulled out a wine bottle with a custom label featuring the exact same wedding photo I'd used for my surprise anniversary gift. The black and white image of my parents dancing at their 1993 reception had been professionally printed on elegant cream paper with gold foil accents. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized not just the photo, but the entire design aesthetic I'd spent hours perfecting with my graphic designer. Even the font choice and layout matched my original concept exactly. I thought it would be so meaningful to create keepsake bottles using your wedding photo, Tiffany explained, beaming with apparent pride. "I found this amazing local designer who specializes in custom wine labels. She said this vintage style would complement any wine you choose during your tastings." Mom's eyes filled with tears as she examined the label. "This is absolutely beautiful, sweetheart. I can't believe you thought of something so personal and romantic." Dad leaned over to admire the bottle, his expression softening with genuine emotion. "That's our first dance song playing in the background of that photo," he said quietly. "I can almost hear the music looking at this." Uncle Marcus reached for the bottle to examine the label more closely. "This is really professional quality work. Where did you find someone who could create something this detailed?" "Just lots of research and reaching out to local artisans," Tiffany replied smoothly. "I wanted everything to be absolutely perfect for such a special milestone anniversary." I felt like I was drowning in the wrongness of the moment. Not only had Jake shared my private research and planning materials with Tiffany, but she was now presenting my exact ideas as her own creative inspiration. The worst part was watching my parents' genuine emotional response to a gift that represented my love and thoughtfulness, even though they had no idea about its true origin. Emma caught my eye from across the table, her teenage intuition clearly picking up on something being fundamentally wrong with the situation. She'd always been observant about family dynamics, probably because growing up with Marcus and Linda had given her examples of what healthy relationship patterns look like. "That's such a coincidence," Emma said innocently. "Dinra was just telling me about custom wine labels last month when we were talking about unique anniversary gift ideas. She said she'd found this amazing designer who specialized in vintage-style wedding photo layouts." The table fell silent for a moment as Emma's observation hung in the air. I saw Tiffany's expression tighten almost imperceptibly before she recovered with a bright smile. "Great minds think alike, I guess," Tiffany laughed. "There must be something about anniversary celebrations that inspires similar romantic ideas." But Aunt Linda was studying Tiffany's face with the kind of professional assessment that came from 20 years of nursing experience. "What an interesting coincidence indeed," she said slowly. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of forced conversation and uncomfortable silences. I barely tasted Mom's apple pie, my mind racing through implications of what I'd witnessed. This wasn't simply about being replaced on a family trip anymore. Tiffany had stolen my specific ideas and was presenting them as evidence of her own thoughtfulness and creativity. When Uncle Marcus asked about trip logistics near the end of the evening, Tiffany launched into a detailed description of the itinerary that made my blood run cold. She described the vineyard cottage's wraparound porch and morning coffee service. She mentioned the private tastings focused on Chardonnays and Cabernet Sauvignon. She even referenced the golden hour photography sessions among vineyard rows and the farm-to-table dining experiences with locally sourced ingredients. Every single element came directly from my research notes and planning documents. Jake had obviously shared everything with her, and she'd memorized the details well enough to present them as her own discoveries and preferences. "It sounds like you've put incredible thought into every aspect of the experience," Dad said admiringly. "I'm impressed by how well you understand what would make this trip special for us." Tiffany glowed under his praise. "I just tried to imagine what would create the most romantic and memorable experience possible. I spent so much time researching different options and thinking about your personalities and preferences." I excused myself to the bathroom before I said something that would explode the entire evening. But standing in the hallway outside my childhood bathroom, I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience. Tiffany wasn't just taking my place on the anniversary trip. She was stealing my identity as the thoughtful, caring daughter who anticipated family needs and created meaningful experiences. The drive home from Sunday dinner felt surreal, like I'd been living in someone else's nightmare for the past hour. I kept replaying Tiffany's detailed description of her anniversary trip plans, each familiar detail feeling like another small knife wound. By the time I reached my apartment in Denver's Capitol Hill neighborhood, rage had crystallized into something more dangerous: determination to understand exactly how deep this betrayal went. My laptop sat open on the dining room table where I'd left it that morning, and I immediately pulled up my cloud storage account to check the shared family folder I'd created years ago. The folder contained photos from family gatherings, contact information for relatives, and planning documents for various celebrations I'd organized over the years. What I discovered made my hands shake with fury. The access logs showed Jake had been viewing files in the folder consistently for the past 6 weeks, coinciding exactly with my anniversary trip planning timeline. He'd opened every document I'd created: vendor contact spreadsheets, research notes on individual wineries, email confirmations from Chef Michelle and Emma Rose Photography, even my detailed day-by-day itinerary with backup plans for weather contingencies. But the pattern went back much further than I'd initially realized. Jake had been accessing my planning materials for over 2 years, viewing documents related to Dad's retirement party, Mom's 50th birthday celebration, last Christmas's family gathering, and even my research for finding the perfect Father's Day gift for Dad's woodworking hobby. I called Sarah immediately, not caring that it was nearly 10 o'clock on a Sunday night. Sarah had been my best friend since college, and her cybersecurity expertise made her the perfect person to help me understand the technical aspects of what I'd discovered. "This is seriously messed up," Sarah said after I'd explained the situation and shared screenshots of the access logs. "Your brother has basically been stealing your intellectual property for years. Do you realize how much time and effort you've invested in these planning projects?" "I never thought about it in terms of intellectual property," I admitted. "It's family stuff. I was just trying to be helpful." Helpful is bringing a side dish to dinner. What you've been doing is professional-level event planning and research. I looked at some of these documents you sent me, and this is the kind of detailed coordination that people pay good money for. Sarah's perspective helped me realize that my planning efforts represented genuine value and skill, not just family obligation. I'd been treating my contributions as expected rather than recognizing them as specialized talents that deserved acknowledgement and respect. "We need to document everything systematically," Sarah continued. "Screenshot all those access logs with timestamps, save copies of your original emails and research notes, and create a timeline showing when you did the work versus when he accessed the files." As we worked through the digital evidence, my phone rang with an unknown number displaying a Napa Valley area code. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Is this Debra Martinez?" asked a warm, professionally friendly voice. Yes, this is Debra. This is Tom Peterson from Vintage Valley Vineyard. I hope you don't mind me calling so late, but I wanted to reach you personally about a rather unusual situation that's developed. My stomach dropped. What kind of situation? Your brother contacted me this afternoon with some concerning information. He said you've been experiencing a mental health crisis and that we should expect you to potentially try to sabotage the anniversary trip arrangements. He asked me not to take any calls from you and to notify him immediately if you attempted to contact our vineyard. The audacity of Jake's manipulation left me speechless for several seconds. Not only had he stolen my planning work, but he was now actively trying to isolate me from the vendors I'd built relationships with during the planning process. Mr. Peterson, I said carefully, I can assure you that I'm not experiencing any kind of mental health crisis. The situation is much simpler than my brother described. I had a feeling something wasn't quite right, Tom replied. All of my interactions with you over the past 2 months have been completely professional and delightful. You've been organized, courteous, and clearly very invested in creating a beautiful experience for your parents. The person your brother described doesn't match the woman I've been working with at all. His validation felt like a lifeline. What exactly did he tell you? He claimed you'd become obsessed with controlling every aspect of the trip and that you'd threatened to cancel everything out of spite when your parents made some small changes to the guest list. He said your family was worried about your stability and that any contact from you should be considered unreliable. The systematic nature of Jake's lies revealed a level of premeditation that shocked me. This wasn't impulsive betrayal. It was calculated character assassination designed to ensure that no one would believe my side of the story if I tried to expose the truth. Mr. Peterson, would you be willing to save any communications you've had with my brother about this situation? I have a feeling I'm going to need evidence of what he's been telling people. Absolutely. And Debra, I want you to know that I've been in the hospitality business for over 20 years. I can usually tell the difference between a difficult customer and someone who genuinely cares about creating meaningful experiences. Your brother's description didn't ring true based on our working relationship. After ending the call, I sat in my living room feeling like I was seeing my family dynamics clearly for the first time in years. Jake hadn't just taken advantage of my planning work. He'd constructed an entire narrative positioning me as unstable and unreliable, ensuring that any attempt I made to reclaim credit for my efforts would be dismissed as delusional rambling from someone having a breakdown. Sarah had been listening to my side of the phone conversation, and her expression was grim when I hung up. Debra, this goes way beyond sibling rivalry. What your brother is doing is psychological manipulation on a level that could seriously damage your reputation and relationships. I keep trying to understand how this happened, I said, feeling exhausted by the emotional whiplash of the past few days. When did I become the family member who gets lied about and discredited? It probably happened gradually, Sarah said gently. You've been the competent, reliable one for so long that everyone started taking your contributions for granted. And when someone's contributions are invisible, it becomes easy to claim credit for them. Her analysis helped me understand how years of being understanding and reasonable had created conditions where my efforts could be stolen without consequence. I'd trained my family to expect my work without requiring acknowledgement, and I'd never demanded credit or recognition for the value I provided. What do you think I should do? First, we finish documenting everything. Then we start quietly reaching out to other people who might have witnessed patterns of this behavior. And finally, you decide whether you want to expose this publicly or handle it within the family. As Sarah and I worked through the night organizing evidence and building a timeline, I realized that this situation represented a crossroads in my relationship with my family. I could continue being the invisible contributor who absorbed disrespect for the sake of keeping peace, or I could demand the acknowledgement and respect my efforts deserved, even if that meant creating conflict. For the first time in my life, conflict seemed like the healthier choice. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood as I sat in my cubicle at Morrison Consulting Group, trying to focus on quarterly marketing reports while my personal life felt like it was imploding. Every few minutes, my mind would drift back to the evidence Sarah and I had compiled the night before, and I'd feel that familiar surge of anger mixed with determination. Grace Chen knocked on my cubicle wall around 10:30, holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing the concerned expression of someone who'd noticed I'd been distracted all morning. "You look like someone who needs caffeine and a friendly ear," she said, settling into the extra chair I kept for client meetings. "Rough weekend." Grace had become more than just a coworker over the past year since transferring from our Atlanta office. Her previous career as an event planner had given us common ground for discussing logistics and project management, and her direct communication style had gradually earned my trust. Family drama. I said, accepting the coffee gratefully, the kind that makes you question everything you thought you knew about people you've loved your whole life. Want to talk about it? I have about 20 minutes before my next client call. Something about Grace's steady presence and professional background made me decide to share the whole story. I described the anniversary trip, planning the sudden replacement with Tiffany, the stolen ideas, and Jake's character assassination campaign with Tom Peterson. Grace listened without interrupting, occasionally asking clarifying questions that helped me organize my thoughts more coherently. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. "Debra, in my previous career, I planned events for corporate executives and wealthy families. What you've described isn't just family dysfunction. It's intellectual property theft on a scale that would be actionable in a professional context." That's what Sarah said last night, but it feels weird to think about family relationships in terms of intellectual property. "Why?" Grace asked bluntly. "Your time has value. Your skills have value. Your research and creativity have value. The fact that you're related to the people benefiting from that value doesn't make it worthless." Her perspective helped solidify something that had been forming in my mind since yesterday. I'd been approaching this situation as a family conflict requiring careful emotional navigation, but maybe I needed to treat it like the professional misconduct it actually represented. What would you do if you were in my position? I'd document everything, systematically gather corroborating evidence from neutral parties, and then expose the truth in a way that couldn't be dismissed or minimized. Grace paused. "But I'd also be strategic about it. Emotional reactions can be discredited easily, but facts presented calmly and methodically are much harder to argue against." During my lunch break, I started reaching out to vendors I'd worked with during the anniversary trip planning process. Tom Peterson had already provided crucial validation, but I wanted to understand the broader scope of Jake's manipulation campaign. Chef Michelle answered her phone immediately when I called her catering service. "Debra, I was hoping to hear from you. I've had the strangest communication from someone claiming to represent your family." "What kind of communication?" "A man identifying himself as Jake Martinez called this morning saying there had been family complications and asking for detailed information about the menu planning we'd discussed. He wanted copies of our email exchanges and seemed particularly interested in the custom dietary accommodations you'd arranged." "Did you share that information with him?" "Of course not. Client confidentiality is fundamental to my business. But he seemed to have some details about the arrangements that made me think he might be legitimate. He knew about your parents' preferences for lighter evening proteins and your father's garlic sensitivity." My heart raced as I realized Jake was still actively trying to appropriate my planning work even after the trip had been effectively transferred to him. "Chef Michelle, did he say anything else?" "He mentioned something about you being overwhelmed by the planning process and needing him to take over coordination responsibilities. He suggested that I should direct all future communication through him to avoid causing you additional stress." The pattern was becoming clear. Jake wasn't just stealing my ideas, he was systematically positioning himself as my replacement in every professional relationship I'd built during the planning process. He wanted to claim credit, not just for the final trip, but for all the relationship building and trust establishing work I'd done over 2 months of coordination. Chef Michelle, would you be willing to document any future communications you receive about this event? I'm dealing with some family complications that might require professional verification of who actually did the planning work. Absolutely. And Debra, I want you to know that in 15 years of providing catering services, I've rarely worked with someone as thorough and considerate as you've been. Your attention to your parents' preferences and your questions about creating meaningful dining experiences showed real care and professionalism. Her words provided emotional validation that helped counteract some of the gaslighting I'd experienced during Sunday dinner. My approach wasn't extra or overwhelming, it was thoughtful and professional. Emma Rose Photography answered when I called her studio number, and she immediately recognized my voice. Debra, I'm so glad you called. I've been trying to reach you about some confusion regarding the anniversary session. What kind of confusion? Someone called yesterday claiming to be your brother and saying the photography session needed to be completely reimagined. He said the couple wanted a more spontaneous approach with lifestyle content creation rather than the romantic anniversary portraits we'd planned. Did he mention anything about my involvement in the original planning? That's the strange part. He said you'd become too controlling about the shot list and that the family wanted someone more flexible to handle coordination. But honestly, our conversations about the session have been some of the most collaborative and creative I've had with a client in years. Emma's validation provided another piece of evidence that Jake's character assassination campaign was broader and more systematic than I'd initially realized. He wasn't just claiming credit for my work, he was actively undermining my professional reputation with people I'd built relationships with. Emma, would you be willing to save any communications you receive about changes to this session? I'm documenting some family issues that might require professional verification. Of course. And Debra, I hope everything works out. The anniversary session concept you developed was truly thoughtful and romantic. I've been looking forward to creating those images for your parents. By the time I returned to work from lunch, I had a clearer picture of Jake's strategy. He was attempting to completely erase my contributions to the anniversary trip, while simultaneously destroying my credibility with the vendors I'd chosen and cultivated relationships with. Grace stopped by my cubicle again around 3 o'clock, noticing that I seemed more focused and determined than I'd been that morning. "You look like someone who's made some decisions," she observed. "I think I have. This isn't just about family drama anymore. It's about protecting my professional reputation and making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Anyone else? Tiffany doesn't know it yet, but she's being set up to be the next victim of Jake's manipulation. Right now, she thinks she's benefiting from his generosity and connections, but eventually she'll create something valuable that he'll want to claim credit for. Grace nodded approvingly. "Now you're thinking strategically instead of just emotionally. What's your next move?" "I'm going to start reaching out to family members who might have witnessed patterns of this behavior over the years. And then I'm going to expose everything in a way that can't be dismissed or explained away." For the first time since receiving that devastating text from Mom, I felt like I had some control over the situation. I was done being the family member who absorbed disrespect for the sake of keeping peace. It was time to demand the acknowledgement and respect my contributions deserved. Tuesday evening, I sat in Emma's bedroom surrounded by printed screenshots, timeline documents, and laptop computers as we worked through the evidence I'd been gathering. At 17, Emma possessed the kind of digital native intuition that made her invaluable for analyzing online activity patterns, and her outsider perspective on our family dynamics provided clarity I couldn't achieve on my own. "This is actually insane," Emma said, scrolling through Jake's access history to my cloud storage files. "Look at this pattern. He's been checking your planning documents every few days for months, always right before family gatherings or gift-giving occasions." She pulled up a detailed access log showing Jake had viewed my Father's Day research files 3 days before presenting Dad with a thoughtfully chosen woodworking book that had been the top recommendation in my notes. He'd accessed my Christmas planning spreadsheet a week before, suggesting the perfect family photo location I'd scouted and researched. Emma, you understand technology better than most adults I know. Is there a way to create a visual timeline showing when I created documents versus when he accessed them? Definitely. I can create a graphic that makes the pattern impossible to ignore. Emma's fingers flew across her laptop keyboard as she began building a comprehensive timeline. This is like watching someone systematically steal homework for 2 years. Her teenage perspective helped me realize how obvious the pattern would seem to anyone viewing it objectively. I'd been so close to the family dynamics that I'd missed the clear evidence of ongoing intellectual property theft. Have you talked to my parents about any of this? Emma asked while formatting the timeline document. Not yet. I wanted to have solid evidence before making accusations that could permanently damage family relationships. Debra family relationships are already damaged. The question is whether you're going to let Jake keep damaging them or if you're going to expose what's really been happening. Marcus knocked on Emma's bedroom door around 8 o'clock, bringing pizza and the kind of straightforward business perspective that had made him successful in construction management. Emma filled me in on the situation, he said, settling into Emma's desk chair. As someone who's dealt with employee theft and contractor fraud, I can tell you this pattern would be grounds for termination and legal action in a professional setting. But it's family, I said, still struggling with the idea of treating family misconduct like business fraud. Family members don't get special permission to steal from each other, Marcus replied firmly. If anything, family theft is worse because it violates trust and exploits love. Marcus examined the evidence Emma and I had compiled, his expression growing increasingly serious as he absorbed the scope of Jake's appropriation campaign. Debra, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before answering. Over the past few years, how much money do you think Jake has saved or earned by using your research and ideas instead of doing his own work? I'd never considered the financial implications before, but as Marcus walked me through the analysis, the numbers became staggering. My restaurant research for family gatherings had saved Jake hundreds of dollars in trial and error dining experiences. My gift recommendations had prevented him from purchasing expensive mistakes. My event planning had eliminated the need for him to hire professional coordinators or spend time on research. Just the anniversary trip planning alone represents at least 40 hours of skilled labor. Marcus continued. If Jake had hired an event planner to do that research and coordination, he'd have paid between $800 and $1,500 for that level of service. Linda arrived just as Marcus finished explaining the financial analysis, bringing the kind of healthcare professional insight that helped contextualize Jake's behavior patterns. I've been thinking about Sunday dinner conversation since Emma told me what was happening, Linda said. Jake's response when you confronted him about accessing the vineyard reservation showed classic signs of manipulation and gaslighting. What do you mean? He immediately minimized your concerns, redirected blame back to you, and positioned himself as the reasonable person dealing with your dramatic reaction. Those are textbook manipulation tactics designed to make victims doubt their own perceptions. Linda's professional perspective helped me understand that Jake's behavior represented something more serious than garden-variety sibling rivalry. He was systematically undermining my reality and credibility in ways that could have long-term psychological impact. The scariest part is how he's convinced Tiffany to participate in presenting your work as her own, Linda continued. Either she's complicit in the theft or she's being manipulated just like everyone else. Emma looked up from her laptop where she'd been researching something. I think Tiffany might be more complicit than we realized. Look at this. She turned her screen toward us, showing Tiffany's Instagram account from the past week. Posted among the anniversary trip excitement posts was a story highlight titled Planning Process that showed screenshots of vendor emails and research documents. The screenshots clearly displayed my name and email address in the sender and recipient fields, but Tiffany had added text overlays saying things like, so excited about the research phase and finding the perfect vendors for this special celebration. She's not just using your work, Emma said grimly. She's actively documenting the theft and presenting it as her own accomplishment to her social media followers. Marcus leaned forward to examine the Instagram posts more closely. This is evidence of fraud. She's misrepresenting the source of professional services to build her personal brand. The revelation that Tiffany was deliberately documenting the appropriation of my work transformed my understanding of the situation entirely. This wasn't simply a matter of Jake sharing information with his girlfriend. It was coordinated misrepresentation designed to advance Tiffany's social media presence and personal brand. There's something else, Emma said, pulling up another set of Instagram posts. Look at the engagement on these planning posts compared to her usual content. The anniversary trip planning posts had significantly higher likes, comments, and shares than Tiffany's typical fashion and lifestyle content. People were responding enthusiastically to what they perceived as evidence of her thoughtfulness and planning abilities. She's building a following based on skills and work that aren't actually hers, Linda observed. That's not just family drama, that's professional misrepresentation. As we continued analyzing Tiffany's social media presence, we discovered she'd been building an entire romantic girlfriend brand based on thoughtful planning and attention to detail. Multiple posts referenced research sessions and vendor coordination without mentioning that all the actual work had been done by someone else. I need to show this to Patricia, Marcus said finally. Your mother needs to understand that she's not choosing between two daughters who have different strengths. She's choosing between her actual daughter and someone who's stolen her daughter's work. Do you think Mom will believe it? I asked. She seemed pretty convinced that Tiffany was naturally thoughtful and creative. The evidence is overwhelming, Linda said firmly, and Patricia isn't stupid. Once she sees the timeline and the documentation, she'll understand what's been happening. Emma had finished creating the visual timeline, and the result was devastating in its clarity. The document showed 2 years of consistent patterns. Debra creates planning materials. Jake accesses them within days. Jake presents ideas. Publicly, family credits. Jake with thoughtfulness and creativity. This timeline makes it impossible to claim coincidence or independent thinking, Emma said proudly. Anyone who looks at this will understand exactly what's been happening. Looking at the comprehensive evidence we'd assembled, I felt a mixture of validation and sadness. The validation came from seeing clear proof that my perceptions had been accurate and my contributions had been substantial. The sadness came from realizing how long I'd been allowing my own family to diminish and steal from me. What do you think I should do next? I asked. You present this evidence to Patricia and Robert, Marcus said without hesitation, and you make it clear that this pattern has to stop not just for your sake, but to prevent Tiffany from becoming the next victim of Jake's manipulation. As I drove home that night with copies of all our evidence, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, confidence in my own worth, and determination to demand the respect I deserved. Tomorrow, I would stop being the family member who absorbed disrespect for the sake of keeping peace. Wednesday evening, I sat across from my parents in their formal dining room, a folder of printed evidence between us on the mahogany table where we'd shared countless family meals. Mom had agreed to this meeting reluctantly, clearly viewing it as an unnecessary drama session she'd have to manage. Dad sat quietly at the head of the table, his expression neutral but attentive. Jake arrived 15 minutes late with Tiffany, both of them carrying the slightly defensive air of people who'd been told they needed to attend a family discussion about misunderstandings. Jake settled into his usual chair with casual confidence, while Tiffany perched beside him, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. I appreciate everyone taking time for this conversation. I began opening the folder and removing the timeline Emma had created. There are some things about our family dynamics that need to be addressed directly. Mom sighed audibly. Debra, I hope we're not going to relitigate the anniversary trip decision. That was settled days ago. This isn't about the anniversary trip specifically. It's about a pattern of behavior that's been affecting our family relationships for over 2 years. I placed the visual timeline in the center of the table where everyone could see it clearly. The document showed 2 columns on the left dates when I'd created planning documents or research materials. On the right dates when Jake had accessed those same files, followed by instances when he'd presented the ideas publicly. This timeline shows Jake's access to my cloud storage files over the past 24 months. I continued watching Jake's face carefully for his reaction. His expression shifted from casual confidence to genuine surprise as he absorbed what the timeline revealed. He clearly hadn't realized that his file access was being tracked and documented. "Debra, this is getting really weird," Jake said, attempting to maintain his usual dismissive tone. "You're making it sound like I've been spying on you or something." "You accessed my Father's Day research files 3 days before giving Dad that woodworking book. You viewed my Christmas planning spreadsheet a week before suggesting the family photo location. You opened my anniversary trip materials consistently throughout my 8-week planning process." Mom leaned forward to examine the timeline more closely, her expression shifting from annoyed dismissal to genuine confusion. "Jake, is this accurate? I mean, maybe I looked at some shared files, but that's what shared folders are for, right? We're family. We share information." "Sharing information would involve asking permission or giving credit," I replied. "What you've been doing is taking my work and presenting it as your own ideas and efforts." Tiffany spoke up for the first time since arriving. "I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Jake has always been really thoughtful about gift giving and planning special occasions." Emma, who'd been quietly observing from the corner of the dining room, held up her phone. "Actually, I've been documenting Tiffany's social media posts about the anniversary trip planning process." She moved to the table and began showing the Instagram screenshots where Tiffany had posted images of vendor emails and research documents with my name clearly visible, overlaid with text claiming credit for the planning work. "These posts show email confirmations with Debra's name and contact information," Emma continued. "But the captions describe the planning process as if Tiffany did the research and vendor coordination herself." The room fell completely silent as everyone absorbed what Emma's evidence revealed. Even Jake looked shocked as he saw the extent to which Tiffany had documented and claimed credit for work she hadn't done. Dad finally spoke, his voice carrying the kind of controlled anger that was somehow more intimidating than shouting. "Tiffany, did you knowingly post images of Debra's email confirmations while claiming you did the planning work?" Jake shared the information with me, and I got excited about being part of the planning process. I didn't think about the technical details of who sent which emails. "You added captions saying, 'So excited about the research phase and finding the perfect vendors,'" Emma pointed out. "Those weren't accidental technical oversights." Mom was studying the Instagram posts with growing horror. "You've been building your social media following by claiming credit for work Debra actually did." "It's not that simple," Tiffany protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "Jake and I were collaborating on ideas for the trip. Just because some emails had Debra's name doesn't mean I wasn't contributing creative input." "What creative input?" I asked directly. "I spent 8 weeks researching wineries, interviewing chefs, coordinating with photographers, and designing custom wine labels. What exactly did you contribute besides Instagram captions?" Tiffany's face flushed as she realized she couldn't identify any actual contributions she'd made to the planning process. The silence stretched uncomfortably long before Jake attempted to redirect the conversation. "Look, maybe there were some communication issues, but this is getting blown way out of proportion. We're family. We should be supporting each other instead of creating drama over shared planning folders." "Jake," Dad said slowly, "you convinced us to replace Debra on a trip she spent 2 months planning, then contacted vendors behind her back, claiming she was having a mental health crisis. How is that supporting family?" I pulled out printed copies of my conversations with Tom Peterson chef Michelle and Emma Rose photography, placing them on the table. Jake told multiple vendors that I was unstable and shouldn't be trusted with communication about the event. He systematically attempted to undermine my professional relationships while claiming credit for my work. Mom read through the vendor communications, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "Jake, you told people your sister was having a breakdown." I was trying to smooth things over after she got upset about the trip changes. I thought it would be easier if I handled the vendor coordination directly. By lying about my mental health and asking vendors to ignore my communications, I asked. The weight of evidence was becoming impossible for Jake to deflect or minimize. His usual charm and casual dismissal tactics weren't working when confronted with documented proof of systematic deception and manipulation. "There's something else everyone needs to see," Emma said, pulling up another Instagram post on her phone. This was posted yesterday. The post showed Tiffany in what appeared to be a staged planning session, surrounded by notebooks and her laptop with a caption that read, "Late night anniversary trip planning session." Sometimes the most romantic gestures require hours of behind-the-scenes research and coordination. Can't wait to share this special celebration with Jake's amazing parents. The post had dozens of comments praising Tiffany's thoughtfulness and dedication, with several people saying they wished someone would plan such thoughtful experiences for them. "You're still posting about planning work you didn't do," Dad observed, his voice carrying deep disappointment. "And you're monetizing it," Emma added, scrolling to show additional posts. "I found sponsored content where brands are paying you to promote products based on your event planning expertise. That's actually Debra's skill and work." The revelation that Tiffany had been earning money from brands who believed she possessed planning skills she'd actually stolen made Mom visibly angry for the first time in the entire conversation. "You've been lying to people for profit," Mom said bluntly. "Using work our daughter did to build your personal brand and make money from sponsors." Tiffany's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. "I didn't set out to hurt anyone." Jake shared the planning materials with me, and I got excited about being part of creating something special. When people responded positively to my posts, it felt good to be seen as someone who could contribute meaningfully to relationships. Her admission revealed something I hadn't fully considered. Tiffany's appropriation of my work wasn't just about social media success, but about her desire to be perceived as someone with valuable skills and contributions to offer. "But instead of developing those skills yourself, you stole mine," I said, feeling a mixture of anger and sadness for her. "And now you're in a relationship built on lies about who you actually are." Jake had been increasingly quiet as the evidence mounted, but now he exploded in frustration. "This is ridiculous. Everyone's acting like I committed some kind of crime by sharing family planning materials. Tiffany was excited to be involved in creating something nice for Mom and Dad. Why does everything have to be about credit and ownership?" "Because intellectual property has value," Dad said firmly. "And because lying about mental health to damage someone's professional relationships is serious misconduct that could have real consequences." The final revelation came when Emma showed us the recording app open on Tiffany's phone, which she'd apparently forgotten to close when she arrived. "Tiffany," Emma said quietly, "is your phone currently recording this conversation?" Everyone turned to stare at Tiffany, who looked like she'd been caught in the most humiliating possible way. Her phone screen clearly showed an active audio recording that had been running for over 30 minutes. "Were you planning to use this family meeting as content for your social media?" Mom asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Tiffany's face went completely white. I thought maybe I could document the process of working through family conflicts. People are interested in authentic relationship content." Jake stared at her with an expression of complete betrayal and horror. "You were recording my family without permission to create social media content." I didn't think it would hurt anyone. I was going to edit it thoughtfully and focus on positive resolution messages. The room erupted in shocked voices as everyone began talking at once, but Dad's firm command for silence cut through the chaos. "Tiffany, you need to delete that recording immediately and leave my house," he said with quiet authority. "You're not welcome at family gatherings until you can demonstrate that you understand how serious this breach of trust has been." As Tiffany gathered her things and left, Jake sat staring at the table with the expression of someone whose entire worldview had just collapsed. The woman he'd been defending and building a relationship with had been manipulating him just as much as she'd been stealing from me. "Jake," Mom said gently, "we need to talk about the pattern of behavior that made all this possible." For the first time in years, my family was ready to have an honest conversation about accountability, respect, and the difference between sharing resources and stealing credit. It was the beginning of a painful but necessary process of rebuilding relationships based on truth instead of enabling dysfunction. 6 months after that devastating family meeting, I sat in my newly expanded Denver apartment reviewing the final proofs for my travel planning website launch. The space felt completely different now, not just because I'd moved to a larger unit with better natural light, but because everything in my life had shifted toward authenticity and mutual respect. The recording incident had served as a catastrophic wake-up call for Jake, forcing him to confront how his enabling of Tiffany's manipulative behavior reflected his own problematic patterns. Within hours of learning about her secret recording plans, he'd ended their relationship and begun the difficult work of examining how he'd participated in creating unhealthy family dynamics. "I never thought about how my actions affected you," Jake had said during one of our first honest conversations after Tiffany's departure. "I just saw shared files and thought everything was available for everyone to use. But when I imagine someone taking credit for my real estate research and client relationship work, I understand how violated you must have felt." His willingness to genuinely examine his behavior and make concrete changes had been essential to rebuilding trust between us. He'd publicly credited me for all the previous occasions when he'd presented my ideas as his own, reaching out to extended family members to clarify the actual source of various thoughtful gifts and event plans. The financial restitution had been Jake's idea. After calculating the monetary value of my appropriated planning work, he'd insisted on paying me $3,000 plus covering all the anniversary trip costs that Mom and Dad eventually decided to convert into a larger family celebration, honoring everyone's contributions. "You deserve to be compensated for skilled labor," he'd said when presenting the payment. "And I need to understand that taking advantage of someone's generosity has real consequences." More importantly, Jake had entered therapy to address the underlying patterns that had made him comfortable with claiming credit for other people's work. His therapist had identified issues with self-worth and achievement anxiety that had driven his appropriation behavior. I was always worried that I wasn't contributing enough value to deserve the success I was having, Jake explained during a family dinner 3 months after the confrontation. "So when I saw your detailed planning work, it felt like a shortcut to being seen as thoughtful and competent. But it was actually making me less competent because I wasn't developing my own skills." Mom and Dad's response to the situation had been both heartbreaking and healing. The revelation that they'd been crediting Jake for my work for years had forced them to confront how their different expectations for each of us had created harmful dynamics. "I realize I've been taking your competence for granted while giving Jake extra credit for basic consideration," Mom had tearfully admitted. "I thought I was helping him build confidence, but I was actually undermining both of you." They'd entered family counseling to examine their parenting patterns and learn how to acknowledge contributions more fairly. The process had been uncomfortable, but ultimately strengthening for all our relationships. "We never want either of you to feel like love and recognition are scarce resources you have to compete for," Dad had said during one of our counseling sessions. "There's enough appreciation and acknowledgement for everyone when we're honest about who does what." The anniversary celebration had eventually taken place as a modified family gathering at Uncle Marcus and Aunt Linda's house, with everyone contributing elements that reflected their actual skills and interests. I'd coordinated vendor relationships, Jake had handled transportation logistics, Emma had managed photography, and Mom and Dad had focused on enjoying their milestone without pressure to manage details. "This feels like what family celebrations should always be," Mom had said, watching Emma capture candid photos of everyone working together. everyone contributing what they're good at and everyone getting credit for their efforts. The travel planning website had emerged from my decision to turn the painful experience into professional opportunity. The business called Thoughtful Journeys specialized in creating customized travel experiences for families and couples who wanted meaningful adventures without the stress of extensive research and coordination. I realized that my planning skills have genuine market value. I'd explained to Sarah when launching the business. Instead of giving away expertise for free and hoping for acknowledgement, I'm providing it to people who specifically want and appreciate detailed planning services. The blog component of the website featured the travel content I'd originally created for that failed anniversary trip. The Napa Valley article had generated significant engagement and led to partnerships with several boutique vineyards interested in promoting thoughtful, relationship-focused travel experiences. Your content shows real understanding of what makes travel meaningful rather than just Instagram-worthy, one vineyard owner had written in response to my article. We'd love to work with someone who appreciates the emotional aspects of creating memories. The business had grown steadily through word-of-mouth referrals from satisfied clients who appreciated working with someone who understood that travel planning could be an expression of love and care rather than just logistics management. Emma had become my unofficial social media manager, helping me document the authentic planning process while maintaining client privacy. Her teenage perspective on digital authenticity had been invaluable for building an online presence based on genuine expertise rather than fabricated content. People can tell the difference between real skills and fake expertise. Emma had observed while helping me create educational content. Your posts actually teach people about thoughtful planning instead of just showing off pretty results. The relationship with my extended family had grown stronger through the crisis. Uncle Marcus had become a business mentor offering advice about client management and service pricing. Aunt Linda had referred several nursing colleagues who needed help planning family reunions and milestone celebrations. "It's wonderful to see you building something based on your actual talents," Linda had said when discussing a referral. "And it's healing for our whole family to see you getting the recognition and compensation you deserve." The most unexpected development had been a message from a woman named Jennifer, who'd read my travel blog content and reached out with her own story of family manipulation and credit theft. "Your article about planning the perfect anniversary trip made me realize that my sister has been stealing my party planning ideas for years," Jennifer had written. "Reading about your experience gave me the courage to start my own event planning business instead of letting her take credit for my creativity." That message had led to the creation of a private Facebook group for people dealing with family members who appropriated their work or talents. The group had grown to over 200 members sharing stories, advice, and mutual support for establishing healthy boundaries around intellectual contributions. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family is refuse to enable their unhealthy behavior. I'd written in a group post that had been shared dozens of times. Setting boundaries around credit and recognition isn't selfish. It's necessary for authentic relationships. Jake had been following the business development with genuine pride and enthusiasm, often sharing my content on his social media with detailed captions, crediting my expertise, and recommending my services to his real estate network. "I'm proud of what you've built," he'd said during our most recent coffee meeting, "and I'm grateful that my mistakes led to you discovering how valuable your skills really are." The anniversary trip situation had ultimately transformed from devastating betrayal into a catalyst for positive change throughout our entire family system. Everyone had learned important lessons about respect, acknowledgement, and the difference between supporting each other and enabling harmful patterns. As I prepared to publish my website and officially launch Thoughtful Journeys, I reflected on how the most painful family crisis I'd ever experienced had led to the most authentic relationships I'd ever enjoyed. The experience had taught me that being understanding and accommodating doesn't mean accepting disrespect, and that true family harmony requires accountability rather than just conflict avoidance. My phone buzzed with a text from a potential client who'd found my website through a referral from one of Uncle Marcus's construction colleagues. She wanted help planning a surprise retirement celebration for her husband and had specifically mentioned being impressed by my attention to meaningful details rather than just surface-level party planning. I can tell from your website that you understand the difference between throwing an event and creating an experience, her message read. That's exactly what I've been looking for. Reading her message, I felt the deep satisfaction that comes from being valued for authentic skills and genuine contributions. The woman who'd once absorbed disrespect for the sake of family peace had evolved into someone who demanded acknowledgement while building meaningful professional relationships with people who appreciated thoughtful service. The journey from that devastating text about being replaced by Tiffany to launching a successful business based on my planning expertise had taught me that sometimes the most painful experiences reveal the most important truths about what we deserve and how we should be treated. Looking back, I realized that Jake's betrayal and Tiffany's appropriation had actually been gifts in disguise, forcing me to recognize my own value and demand the respect that had always been my right to expect. Now, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where family members took credit for your hard work or talents? How did you handle it, and what advice would you give to someone dealing with similar challenges? Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with your own experiences, I'd be grateful if you'd hit the like button to let me know. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges and building authentic relationships, and please share this with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the importance of standing up for yourself within family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you the courage to demand the recognition and respect you deserve in all your relationships.